So I really shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Today, I am going to tell you how to hack Spotify in order to get your podcast more visibility. And I'm going to give you the answer right here at the beginning of the video. Nobody does that, right? They make you watch the whole thing because the YouTube algorithm wants you to listen through and watch the whole thing. But here's the trick. I added the words video game to my titles of my podcasts. There you go. That's it. That you've got the hack. Now you can go do that. Okay. So there's probably a little bit more to it. So, if you're interested in learning more about that, then make sure you stay for the rest of the video. So here's the thing. Why do I have any knowledge about any of this stuff at all? Well, I used to do SEO. I used to run the SEO department for a marketing agency, search engine optimization, SEO. And I learned a few things about the way that search works on different platforms, not only Google, but other platforms. So something like Spotify or Apple, when you search for the name of a podcast, it's doing something in order to recommend certain shows to you. We don't know what it's doing, but we can get a pretty good sense of how that works and what's going on in the background by doing some tests. We have to kind of backwards engineer their algorithm in order to find out what's going on. So I thought, okay, well, let's see what's actually going on with Spotify. So I was putting in my information for my shows. And by the way, if you want to play with this, use the Spotify search on, say, a browser, but put yourself in like incognito mode so that it's not using previous search data in order to influence what things pop up. Like if it knows you're already listening to certain shows, then those shows will show up towards the top. You don't want that. You want it to be absolutely fresh. It doesn't have any other previous data. And then put in the type of show your show is. So if you do a video game podcast about, let's say, Fallout, like one of my shows, the Fallout Lorecast, maybe somebody would search Fallout podcast or Fallout, and then see what shows up. I think you'll be surprised, or maybe not. Maybe you've done this before, but you'll notice that some shows showed up at the top, kind of the ones that you would expect, the more popular ones, and then your show might be down on the list somewhere. But why does it put certain shows in certain spots? Well, here's what I figured out. The Spotify algorithm actually prefers keywords to volume of downloads. Let that sink in. You would assume that something with more downloads is always going to show up higher than something else. And that's generally the case. But number of downloads currently isn't one of the strongest influences on the algorithm. First, it's keywords. Second, still not downloads, it's rating, because they added the ability to rate shows. So if your show has an average rating of like 4.9, then it may show up higher than a show with more downloads if your keyword that is searched is in the title of your show and you have a high enough rating. So putting all this all together, I was like, okay, let's look at the landscape. If this works for Fallout, if I put in Fallout and I see that my show's in a specific place and I have a certain rating, and then I look at the show next to it and it's in a place that has the word Fallout in the title and it has a slightly lower or equal rating, then this basically makes sense, right? But what other terms do people search for my show? So I put in video games or just video game podcast. Do people search video game podcast? Absolutely. What comes up? And I noticed that almost all of the answers that come up for that have video game in the title. They're not necessarily the most popular video game podcasts, not the top ones that you would expect that everybody knows about. They were primarily shows with video game in the title. So I thought, okay, if I were to add video game in my title, what does that do? And sure enough, my show started to rank within the first few columns, or I guess rows, on the search. And I was like, this is nuts. Because what percentage of people are just searching a broader term like video game instead of a more specific term like Fallout? Probably a lot. So I did this with all of my video game podcasts. I put video game in the title. So right now it says something like Fallout Lorecast, the video game podcast about Fallout lore or something like that. It's a long time. This is actually called keyword stuffing, by the way. It's one of those things that like Google will penalize if you stuff too many keywords into the title of something. But Spotify is not as sophisticated as Google search. Makes sense, right? That's what Google's job is. They do search. And in order to do search, they then give you ads based on the search. So the search and the keywords have to work well. Spotify just wants you to listen to shows. They're not super worried about how the search results work as long as it's giving you something that you're looking for. And if you're looking for something with a specific title, then it wants to give you the right title. So it makes sense. So how does this apply to you? Well, think about your show. Maybe you don't do a video game show. Maybe you do a show about movies. Does your show have movies in the title? Or movie or anything like that? Do you do a show about finance or economics? Does your show title include that? And the easiest way to include things like this in the title is to put your current show name, and then a subtitle afterwards. You can add that in there and then check the charts on Spotify, see if that shows up. Now, here's another thing that I think everybody needs to know for this topic. Absolutely, this is super important. If your show title, and this is something that, so I run the Robots Radio Podcast Network. I also punch microphones, and I talk with our Rocket Club members, which, by the way, you can sign up for on robotsradio.net if you're interested in getting some advice on how to grow your show. So my shows have reached over 3 million downloads. I know what I'm doing. I work with dozens of other creators on this stuff all the time. But if you'd like some help with that, go check that out. Here's the thing. One of the things that I get the most pushback on from creators is the name of their show. So if you're doing a financial show, let's say you're doing a show about personal economics, personal finances, and the name of your show is something like the Smart Ideas Podcast, that title doesn't tell me anything about your show. It's also not searchable. This also doesn't work for the whole Spotify thing. Your title might make sense. It might even be really clever, but maybe it's too clever. Your show name should tell the audience exactly what they're going to get if they try out your show, because they're trying to determine by looking at a whole list of other shows which one to listen to. And if your show name tells them what your show is about, you're more likely to get clicks. It also is more likely to rank in search on platforms like Spotify when people put those keywords in. So, for example, if somebody wants to do personal finance and they want to find a personal finance podcast, if personal finance is not in your title, it's less likely to rank. And I hear the questions already. What about in the description? Are there other places to put that? What about the names of episodes? Absolutely. That stuff does factor in, but it does not factor in as strongly. Wouldn't you rather use all of the tools at your disposal in order to get your show up to the highest place where most people can find it? That's the tip. So go check the name of your show, go try this on Spotify, and see what you get. Play with some different name changes. And by the way, you can just change the name. It's not a big deal. All right. Make sure you come back here for more advice like this. I'm here. I'm going to be doing lots of these videos for you guys. And I'm Tom, or Robots, your podcast professor. I'll see you guys next time.